Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who never met a homophone he couldn't mangle.
Tim Longo. Oh, I knew it. I knew it was going to come up.
Yeah, of course. Those who follow our Twitter feeds know that Tim can't spell.
Well,
you misspell or whatever, but
yeah, I'm just an idiot. That's all.
It's funny because actually your tweet reminded me of this story I read once about this like remote tribe that didn't have any concept of joint ownership. Like no one could own something like in partnership with somebody else. It was the weirdest thing. There was no there.
Okay, yeah, that's very good. I was like, where is he going with this? Yeah. No, Brett's the brains of the operation, so I think we've clearly established that. So
yeah, I'm a programmer. Language can't be ambiguous.
Uh-huh.
Anyway,
what about your bugs?
Sure.
Anyway, you're right. They can't be because of bugs. Anyway, sorry. So yeah, good one. But onward, GTA 3, Session 3.
Session 3, the third in our increasingly long sessions of playing this game. So I had my own problems, and maybe we'll get into the save game stuff from this, but last time off air, I went, oh man, I didn't remember to go back to the safe house or whatever to save my game. And I had totally forgotten. We're so used to these days. Just we have a hard drive and the games save as frequently as they need to. And they put a little icon up or whatever. And the game just saves at some reasonable point. And of course, these games did not. And in particular, this game does not. So you want to talk a little bit about the save system, and then we'll get into sort of like mission checkpointing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think to your point, it feels like, and I think this is an interesting question for the genre that they definitely probably, posed with this game that they didn't know they were posing, and has been refined, like Brett said, over time, where there's autosaves and things. But it does seem as a save system that it is focused on your end of night save. We're done. You're not going to go and do this multiple times because it's pretty cumbersome because you physically have to go to this place, drive to this place to save. I'm playing on PC, so there might be some differences. We're still figuring that out. But so it's sort of like, yeah, I'm kind of done. My quick loops of playing missions over and over again are just the tomfoolery you might get up to. If you get wasted, then you just start at the hospital, and then you go on your merry way. And it feels like they were really leaning into that sort of fluidity. And I can see how that design would be why they would do it, because as we've talked about, I think in previous episodes, and I think I mentioned even there's still some of this criticism for their modern games. There is this tension between the mission design and mission flow and their world design, because it is very much a lot of their systems, including the save system, is built around this kind of playfulness of it. And so, okay, I get wasted and I die from some trouble I got myself in. Well, I just pop back up and respawn at the hospital, and then I just run and steal a car and keep going,
Right.
And so I can see the logic of it. As I have always said on the podcast, I'm a bit OCD and completionist in a way. And so I've built up my arsenal and my armor and stuff to a point where one false hit of a fire hydrant or something, I don't want my car to blow up and then lose all that stuff. So I've actually been, cumbersomely reloading rather than just respawning at the hospital, because I don't want to lose all that stuff, because I actually have probably more than I need, I'll admit. And I haven't really found a good loop to replenish that stuff. If I do start at a hospital, the quick one, other than just going and spending more money. And maybe that's a part of it too, is I need to be less precious with my money. But,
yeah, I just do that myself. I just go to the ammunition and get the things I think I'll need for whatever mission I've been doing.
Yeah, but I have I have everything, and it's not, I have to, I know. I have to take it with you, Tim. What's that?
I said you can't take it with you.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But I just wanted to bring that up of that. It's another example for me of that dissonance between those two sort of designs in a way,
Yeah.
where they're definitely leaning into, and I appreciate the sense that it is just this respawn system, and you kind of just can keep playing, and that's cool. But when it comes to the mission, like you said, was okay, I just failed this mission 5 times, and I lost my stuff every time. And now I have to go to the ammunition every time, and just
just more setup to everything. Yeah, no,
it kind of adds to the frustration of it. Yeah,
there's a couple other things that sort of tie into the save system and separate from the mission checkpointing, and that is we're in this era where we've moved away from cartridge based media. I've been playing Banjo-Kazooie in my spare time. In the rare replay for the Xbox One, and that game autosaves. And I thought a little bit about that. I'm like, well, this is an older game and it autosaves, and why is that fine? And it's of course because the save data was on the cartridge.
Oh, right.
And that's why there was a limited number of them and what have you. And, so there's 3 or whatever in Banjo-Kazooie, because they're basically taking whatever memories left over from the game, in the cart, because the carts came in specific sizes from the manufacturer, which was Nintendo in that case. And so they shoehorned their saves, and they had however many they could actually support. For Banjo, it was 3. Here, we're on the PS2, and because we've now moved to a disc-based media where there is no possibility to save to the actual game, you have to have a separate mechanism for doing that, and hard drives were prohibitively expensive to include in consoles at the time, so the way they did it was with memory cards. And as a so there's 2 things that happen there. One is that they require you talk about the fact that you're writing stuff to the memory cards constantly. It was obnoxious at the time. I remember how you had to use specific language, and it was like, you had to call it the Sony, you had to call it the memory card, all caps, and then in parentheses for PlayStation 2, and then in parentheses TM, etc. I mean, it was madness. And every time you wanted to do anything with it, you had to say saving to the, memory card, 8 megabyte for PS2. It was ridiculous. And especially in those first couple of years, they got a little looser with it later on. Anyway, the other thing about that is that is a slow and possibly failure ridden mechanism. If somebody's pulled the memory card, if somebody, you can't pull a cartridge and have the game work. So that the save space is there. You can just write to it. With a memory card, somebody could pull it at any time. They could put a different one in, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these different ways that those things can fail. And we're kind of in that middle period of just grossness, where you can't count on your save media being there. And now we're back on the other side, in modern development, where everything has a hard drive, and that was not true of the Xbox 360, which led to its own problems. But we're on the other side where everything has a hard drive. You write to the hard drive. Yes, you have to handle failures and alert the player and say, oh, hey, something terrible happened. We couldn't write your save data. What do you want to do? But that's a very rare case. Whereas, I mean, to one of the real horrible things about shipping on the PlayStation 2 or the other sort of systems at the time that had save cards was you had to support all this crazy stuff that almost no players would do. Like, oh, I pulled out the card and put a different one in or what have you. Or it just failed to write, for whatever reason. So you ended up with these sort of very narrow approaches to how you could save the data. And it was frustrating, but that was just where we were at the time. Anyway. I had forgotten all about any of that stuff until this all started all crashing back when I had to replay, a couple of hours of this game. So,
right. Are you playing? So did you already say you're playing on PS2?
I'm playing on a PS2. Yes, a Slim that I have.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you're saying this in addition to what you're just kind of reminiscing about, but are you saying that this is a good example of sort of the media style, and what I mean by that is the disc media, and the technology of the system having an impact on the save system design within the game?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, because
No reason you couldn't save anywhere in this game, I don't think. I mean, you could do what anybody else would do. So there is a sort of design consideration that they do, which I think was kind of common at the time to sort of, it was a thing that people were experimenting with, which was trying to find a way that made sense in your game world to do the checkpointing. I mean, you even see this on PS1 games where it's like you have save crystals for, a place you go and stand, and you're allowed to save here instead of saving. Yeah, Tomb Raider.
We didn't play that way, but that's how the PS1 version worked, right?
Right, exactly. So I think they're kind of following in that lineage a bit. And when you're doing an open world, I'm not sure it would make sense to have those things sprinkled everywhere. Yeah. So you might as well just pick one spot per island at that point.
Yeah, well, and then kind of weirdly too, though, because you have a respawn of the hospital, and then you have your own, home base too, right? So it's like, it actually reminded me of another system that I always felt was hard to wrap my head around as a player, and I probably as a designer was overthinking it. But BioShock, right? Because you have the chamber,
chambers, regen chambers.
Yeah. What were they called?
Vita Chambers?
Oh, yeah, Vita Chambers. Yeah, you have those, but it also had a regular save system. So it's like, when do I want to use the... You know what I mean? It felt like kind of like a vestige of a design that they didn't really need. Yeah. I don't remember there being an advantage, really, per se, other than maybe some... it speeds it up a little bit to use the Vita Chamber. But anyway, it's sort of like, it just reminded me of this sort of like dissonance between these two things, and kind of like not kind of, even though I love BioShock, just sort of a weird decision that I never really quite understood the complete design rationale for. Maybe it was, kind of like you said, it was sort of a console mentality that I played on PC, so maybe it was in there for that reason or something. I don't know. But of course, those are hard drives too, so there was really no reason to do that. It kind of frustrates me now that you mentioned this whole topic, though, because now I'm thinking, this PC port's actually pretty bad.
Yeah.
If they could have saved anywhere. They, a lot of good PC ports give you that capability after the fact, but they just didn't bother. It's just a straight port.
And there's no reason not to. I mean, you could save... Obviously, you can save so much more on the PC. You could literally just say, okay, you can save anywhere, and it's just going to respawn you with whatever car you're currently in at your hideout. It's possible to abuse that sort of stuff, but who cares? Like, it's a single player game, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, let them,
let people take the time to quit whenever they need to quit, right?
Yeah. It's quality of life stuff, and it's the sort of, there's definitely a bit of that stubborn developeritis maybe. It definitely would have it would make the game way shorter, right? Of course.
Yeah.
If they did that. So I don't know if that was, but who knows how these ports were done.
Yeah. I mean, it might have been somebody else did it, or, was it Take Two, I guess?
I did. I think you looked it up at one
decision.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but I mean, I think that segues into, our clashing with the save system, and the two different ways we're kind of utilizing whatever you call it, kind of, I think, segues into the mission failure sort of loop, if you will, that I think we can launch into that now. And I think, is it safe to say that the assassination of Salvatore was sort of the culmination of a good example of that for both of us?
Absolutely. That is the one. So we were talking pre-show about like ways that you failed missions and the different things that happened.
Oh my God, it's not.
And that is the one that I failed. I mean, I streamed all of it and I failed it numerous times, always in different ways. And one of the things that happens, and this is not the only mission where this happens, and in fact, the one prior to this is another good example, is where you actually learn stuff on failure that make you rethink your approach the next time.
Yeah, no, I wrote that note down. I can't argue that. It's just not, we talked about the Tomb Raider. It's not the best way to do it.
It's not ideal. I mean, there's the the prior mission where he basically tries to kill you, right? The last requests or whatever it's called, where you're supposed to go get this car, and if you start up that car and drive, it explodes and kills you. So now you know. Okay, well, what's that?
I didn't do that. I got distracted. So sorry to interrupt, but when that mission starts, you have the location of the car. On my way there, the location, I don't know how this triggered, but the second location where his daughter is at the boat popped up. And so I went there instead. And I went straight there, and she said, "Oh, thank goodness you're here, blah, 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 blah." And so I didn't even go to that car.
But that didn't happen to you.
No, I actually kind of accidentally went in the right direction. And then
the next mission. Interesting, because that didn't, it's possible I missed it and that popped up and I just didn't notice. Because I went to the car exploded in my face. And I was like, wow. And then I had to restart. Obviously I had to go and get the mission again, which is kind of like, well, okay.
That's
but what,
yeah.
What called to mind though was Casino, the movie, the Scorsese movie, where there's a scene where somebody is in their car and it blows up. And then later on, you actually see what actually happened and how they managed to get out. Like, it didn't blow up in the driver's seat and they had time to get out of the car. It was sort of like a weird, like, oh, okay, I can sort of see how this sort of echoes this movie I've seen, this mob movie I've seen. And so it's a little less troubling, but still terrible. It's like, oh, I got to figure out how to do this without setting off this bomb, which is basically you get in, you get out.
I see. I see. Okay. I didn't understand. So you blew up the first time because you were in the car. You didn't know it was going to blow up.
Right.
And then
it was going to blow up. So the next time I didn't do that. And the same thing happened doing this, killing Salvatore mission was, okay, I go over here, I park here. Oh, they see me. Okay. I'll drive from this other direction. But that draws all the Chinatown guys around me. Oh, okay. Maybe I'll try to do a sniper rifle. Maybe if I get over here with a sniper rifle, I'll be able to shoot him from a distance. Like, I just kept adding this stuff on, almost like the Hitman. I forget what they're called, but basically the progressive missions where they make them more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. The escalations, right. Only I was escalating it for myself of basically like, okay, I can't do this. So maybe if I do this, and then what if I add this? And I just kind of like, and then I tried like getting a really big, tough car, like basically a truck, a Mack truck. Yeah. And they shot that so quickly that it exploded with me in it. And I ended up basically falling back on the simplest thing, which was like, I went and bought grenades. I drove to a space which was just outside the range where they'd see me. And once they all pulled up, I started chucking grenades at where he was going to come out. And he finally came out and the cars all blew up because all the grenades started going off, and that worked. And they killed me actually in the same, basically immediately after I succeeded. It was like mission success wasted. I was like, just in time. So
yeah. I had many of the same attempts as you did, different techniques. And the one you didn't mention that I elaborately set up a couple times to see if I could do it, because I eventually figured out where he drives to. He tries to drive home.
Oh, right.
So I put a bunch of like cars in front of that entrance to his home as a roadblock, and then I caused a bunch of traffic accidents all along the route. So there was just obstacle, like there were probably 20 different cars, all just, in different states of destruction all along their route. And then I got into like a Hummer or something. And I was like, oh, there's no way they're getting through this. And then his escorts are just ruthless. I mean, they can turn on a dime. They don't blow up as quickly. They hit you with this force that just flings you across the street. There's just no way I was going to ram him to death. I got pretty close a couple of times, and then he gets to my roadblock and just kind of pushes through it, So it's like I guess they had thought about that, or the way that they had tuned and weighted his car and stuff, that wasn't an option. So what I ended up falling back on, I was just out of range of sight. I just parked across down the street and I sniped him as he came out.
Yeah.
And it was just over quick and simple. And then I just walked away.
Yep.
It was a very Hitman moment for sure.
Yeah. See, the time I tried to snipe him, I couldn't get a beat on him quick enough, and they spotted me while I was trying to do it. This is the time where I managed to get there without alerting all of Chinatown to come after me.
I was on the opposite side of Chinatown, so there, I was.
Oh, okay. So you're not. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And they just drove the car straight into me. They just hopped in a car and drove it straight into my lap. So it was like it's like that scene in Terminator where he says, "I'll be back," and
Right. Yeah. Well, and I was standing behind the car, so I don't know if that helped or not, but so the car was between me and them. The one admission I have to have on air though is that I feel a little bit of cheating and exploity. The sniper rifle on PC is just completely unfair because I switched to mouse.
Oh yeah,
keyboard for that, and I basically can just zoom in and have pinpoint accuracy with the mouse, right, with the sniper rifle. So it's the only one you can do that with because it goes into zoom mode,
right?
So it's the only one that works. But that the previous mission, which I won't get into, that I had similar trouble with. Because I didn't get as far as I think we should have in this last session, as I mentioned to Brett in pre-show, because I had to replay so many missions so many times, was the one where you're escorting 8-Ball onto the ship. And I just could not, I didn't realize you could go on top of buildings.
Yeah.
So I just could not protect him enough. I was like, what am I doing wrong? And trying to snipe all those guys with the controller was just not ever going to work. And then I sort of realized I could switch to PC, and then I found that I could get on that roof. And then, with a mouse, it was sort of like silly. I just sniped them all so quickly.
It's not too bad with a controller from that rooftop, but you have to be up above. Otherwise you can't. So it's
there's just the aiming curves and the aim assist and all that. So there's just nothing.
Yeah,
their first person controls are not good. But anyway,
so really good first person aim assist didn't come along until Halo. So which
we've already talked about the same year, right? So
yeah. No, and it's something we stole, right? So whoever did that work wrote it up for Java Sutra or Game Developer or something like that, and we liberally borrowed from that. Obviously we have code, but everybody just went and said, "Oh, this is how you do it." Rockstar didn't have the benefit of that information.
And anyway, So it's just the failure loop, and we already kind of talked about it as it relates to the save system, and just
and then there's another wrinkle with the Salvatore thing, which is that your mission giver is on the other island.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I wrote that note down too. Oh my god!
And when you die, you don't. So one of the things that they add in Vice City is that when you die doing a mission, there's a taxi cab wherever you come back, and if you open the taxi cab, it just takes you back to where that mission is given, which is great. It makes it much easier. The problem with this initial game is that when you die, you go to the hospital, or if you're arrested or whatever, you go to the hospital or the police station on the island that you're on.
Yeah.
And so in the case of this, you actually end up, I mean, I guess you're not any further than if you had succeeded, but you end up having to go all the way back over to go to the mission giver, in this case, Asuka, and then go back over the bridge again back into Portland to actually carry the mission out. It is extremely frustrating. I hope that's the only one of these. I think it probably is, but man, I was just like, oh no, you're kidding me. I have to, and I couldn't. Yeah. The other thing too is that we've talked a little bit, and maybe this is a good way to get to segue, is that this is a game where you end up having to learn the environment pretty well.
Yeah, there's no real map, right?
So not great, because it's so. It's
the radar.
The radar in the lower left.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no way to get your relativity, right? Of for the context for that. The radar is good for short term, but getting
the only way you get more information is by going faster.
Does it zoom out?
The radar, zooms out the faster you're going.
Oh, okay, yeah. But still, like if I want to plot a course from here to get to the darn bridge,
Impossible.
you can't do it. You got to just like drive around. And then there's timed missions where you're like, shoot, it's timed and I don't know where I'm going, and that's another reason that I end up failing a lot is, I just haven't learned the city. And so it basically seems like part of their design was to kind of force you to learn the city, memorize it, landmark.
I mean, I think it happens somewhat naturally, and there's a fair amount of me going as I'm driving around now in the new island, Staunton Island, I guess. There's a fair amount of me recalling having played this 5 or 6 years ago, or whatever it is now, going, oh, okay, I remember this. I remember this dig site, and I remember the stadium and the university. Which actually I think is borrowed from Seattle. I think that's more like the University of Washington campus than
it's like that.
Yeah. I recognized it this time. I don't think I had been to Seattle yet when I last played this game. And there was a point on stream where I drove around that corner and there was a stadium. I was like, oh man, this is just like UW. So who knows? But yeah, so I'm trying to get back to Asuka. And I can't figure out how to drive there. I mean, I just couldn't. And it's like, oh, actually, if you go past the street where the ammunition is to the next one and take a right, it actually takes you down there. It took me a long time to figure that out. And that's definitely a problem. Part of that is, of course, you've got this radar in the lower left. Most of the landmarks that you could use to navigate are in the top half of your vision.
Yeah, it's the playing the radar game, right? Problem.
Well, your eyes are drawn lower to look at the radar, but the actual landmarks that would help you are on the top half of the screen. So you can't actually see them both at the same time, and never end up having the confidence, or it takes you a long time to have the confidence just to drive according to what you can see, in the city around you.
Yeah.
I think the games get better at that in time because they're able to squeeze more out of the PS2. They get better at the design so that you can actually tell kind of where you are just based on the architecture more. Because this is very blocky. This is very gray. There's not a lot of, there are landmarks, but they're rare. And like I said, they're kind of out of your sort of immediate field of view. You'd have to kind of look up. So they get there, but yeah, you are sort of forced to learn the map or be really, really good at how to read that radar.
Yeah. And I there's a certain amount of appreciation I can have for that mentality, because I think we probably talked about that from time to time in various other genres and games that we played, and that sense of mastery over a world and a sense of place is always kind of a cool moment, when you're like, oh, I really know this place, and I'm, that's a kind of a sense of achievement in a intrinsic way that is cool. And so I appreciate that. However, I think that they've mixed it with additional mechanics and systems that really counteract that sometimes, i.e. putting a timer on many missions where you're under pressure and having to learn. And so, it's sort of like, well, just don't do the missions and then just kind of like do other stuff to learn and then come back to it, which if I want to do the missions, then that's counterintuitive for me as a player, So it's like, well, no, I want to do the missions. And so the game should be, from a usability standpoint, leading me down that, in a gradual way, ideally. So they just, I'm sure they get better at that. And like you said, and they just weren't there yet, and they didn't know what they had to some degree, So, one thing I put an additional note on that, as Brett knows, I'm pretty down on the game right now. On sort of some of parts of it. However, I will say what I've been trying to do in the last session is put myself in the time again that it came out. And there definitely have been some moments in this last session that I thought to myself, this is pretty darn amazing. What they did just structurally, you know what I mean? As just kind of a developer looking at it and as a player, and kind of the mind blowing aspect of it. If I really put myself at that point, and other games like Halo or whatever coming out the same year had their own versions of awe. But there's some moments when I really I had a nice car and I'm really, I'm running on all cylinders, no pun intended, and just kind of I'm feeling it,
Yeah.
And you're going across the bridge to the other island or something. And you're like, wow, this is something else. Especially when I put myself in that time and on that system, which was a pretty unruly, not great system in a from a kind of a technology standpoint, even though it was so
just
successful.
a little trickier to use, right? I mean, that's been kind of the PlayStation way, for PlayStation 2 and 3 especially. I think that so I'm a programmer, right? And you'd think that I'd love to complain about the hardware, but that's just the hardware. That's just part of the puzzle for me. It's like, how do I get the most? And I've actually gotten to that later in life than back in the era of the PS2, it was more like, just give me something that, turns my code into something that'll run on this. And, I didn't have to think about it too much as a gameplay programmer on Starfighter or whatever. But now it's I wish I could be programming on the PS2 again, knowing what I know now with 20 years of development in me, because I probably won't have a machine that interesting to develop for again ever.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, and your perspective is totally different. And we, to harken back to a previous series that we did on Metal Gear 1, that I think there's similar conversations to be said about that, right? Because of what it did for the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
And things that you just couldn't believe it was doing. So that's always impressive too.
Yeah.
That's kind of more what I meant of there's just putting it against its peers on an even playing field of this platform at this time is just kind of mind-boggling what they did. So that's a cool, so I'm having a better time once I'm trying to really relish that rather than just fight it, because I've been fighting this game too much, and that's why I'm not as far as I'd like to be, because I just, oh man, the failure loop is so rough.
Yeah, the failure cost is very high. It's very high. I don't disagree. And you get to this point where, doing that mission to kill Salvatore, I really knew that loop to go from Asuka's to where he was going to be, however I wanted to get there, but also after I died or was otherwise failed, then, getting back over the bridge to go back to Asuka. I got really, really good at that loop. It was absurd.
Yeah. Well, the crux of it you already mentioned is really just failure-based learning, because there's you probably haven't done it because it's an Asuka mission, but Asuka, is that her name?
Yeah, Asuka. Right?
Yeah. Have you done the mission where you have to take out the undercover cops who are surveilling the area?
Oh, is that a ton of blue?
Yeah, there's that one. Yeah, there's that one to some degree, because you kind of you have to go all over the city, that island, and learn. But then the one after that I
didn't do the one after that. I just did that one, and then I started doing Kenji's.
Okay, yeah, the one after that is, or one or two after that is, you have to drive to these specific phone booths all across the island under a certain time. Oh yeah, that's the one that leads to the washed up cop. Right,
which I haven't gotten to.
So anyway, the way you find him, spoiler, is through a series of, okay, she tells you to drive to this phone booth, and then he tells you to drive to the next one, and it's all timed, and so you just have to keep learning the routes. And so, truth be told, I definitely know Staunton Island better now because of that mission, because it's really the timer on that is down to the wire. I had 12 seconds left when I finished it, and I played it probably 5 times. But I just hate learning that way. It's there's no, and I didn't even know how many
Yeah, there's nothing else you can really do to learn it either. It's not like
No.
driving around would even be successful for that. Yeah, it's
No, because they don't tell you where they're going to be, and I don't know how many there are.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's super frustrating.
but
Yeah.
you actually said something interesting in pre-show that I didn't put in my notes that I think is a good point. That it totally didn't dawn on me, but I think it's a really excellent point that the missions of this game and the sort of structure of it is really about using the tools and the pieces that they had more than it is about the other way around, right? It's like it's built upon the systems they had and all the tools they had versus a mission-based game that is built around the mission-based systems. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's like, what did they have at their disposal? Well, they have a timer, they have these hotspots of blue arrows, and they have some VO, and then triggers. It's like, well, okay, what can we make out of this? And the player can go in any way they want to, so that it has to be pretty flexible. But it's really like putting these nuts and bolts together in just as interesting and creative ways as they can with their constraints, and it's naturally going to be janky, to some degree, because they're just not meant to do this. And I feel like
and that feels like a thing of that era, right? Is that
that's fair.
You just have a lot of sort of simple stuff, and you hook it up. I mean, even
Thief had some of that.
Yeah, Thief had some of that. I was going to say, even just sort of Unreal games at the time are built that way. I mean, Unreal has this sort of scripting layers, and they have it how it kind of ties into the editor, and you can sort of drag this to that and sort of see it maybe visually a little bit if you add a little work into it. All the stuff we did in Republic Commando is very sort of based on the same kind of mechanisms. I mean, we don't use timers for anything, but it's all sort of pretty simple bedrock kind of stuff that you bend to your will. I was just talking today with designers on my current project about how on Jedi Starfighter, this very simple system of basically, when this thing happens, run these scripts, these few lines of script, led to a capture the flag mission with 4 different flags, and enemies from both, or people from both sides trying to take the flag and bring it back to their side of the field or what have you. In that one that, what was his name?
You mean that they were like cargo?
The cargo droids, right? Yeah, that would come out and they try to steal the pieces of that big cannon, basically. Yeah. That was not a thing I thought was possible to build in our game. And it's basically, you give level designers these sort of simple, fairly atomic base level tools and say, okay, well, here's how you can make them interact. I got to go make all this run fast enough now. So you just, do what you can, and they just do it, and come up with a lot of stuff that is kind of surprising, really, that you can do as much as you can often with these sort of simple building blocks. In a way, it reminds me of games that are sort of like physics puzzles, like The Incredible Machine or Casey's Contraptions, where you don't have a lot of parts, and yet you can make these, sort of crazy physics puzzles that are basically Rube Goldbergs that do what you want. You want to have done. In those, that's the point. You're like, solve the puzzle. Here, the level designers are solving the puzzle, except the puzzle isn't a known thing, right? They're trying to make fun gameplay out of, I have some spit and baling wire and a little bit of duct tape. So let me try to make something out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the interesting, the Jedi Starfighter example is good, and I think we had similar stuff in Republic Commando to call to, or really, any sort of mission based game. I think the interesting difference for me in this case is, which is it's definitely a hard thing to narrow and to focus on for any team, and any leadership team for a development team, is when you're starting to bend the systems and the engine to your will to do something. How cognizant are you of how I guess I don't want to say in line with the sort of core focus of the game, the bending that you're doing is. And I think, you know what I mean? So it's like if you go to a certain degree or a certain direction with the way you're bending things, it sometimes will kind of contradict what is the core of the game in other places, even though you're cleverly finding ways to do it. So so for instance, in the mission, the Jedi Starfighter mission you're mentioning, there's still a sort of objective based scenarios there that are based in a starfighter kind of world. And in this case, you're kind of putting a sort of linear mentality within a game that clearly has an amazing kind of open world sandbox. And I guess it's just sort of like you have to be careful how far you bend or what direction you bend things in. You should always bend things, but you have to be careful what direction you bend them in.
Yeah.
If I can overuse that metaphor or whatever multiple times, but does that make sense? You know what I mean?
I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I'm glad we're talking about that JSF mission because it was when I originally played it when it was too hard to ship. It was too difficult to play. That was the most satisfying time I had with a Starfighter level ever. When that level is tuned to be too difficult, really, for sort of our target audience. There was a there was a time that I just managed to get that done, and it was so hard to play. And at the end of it, I was just like, oh man, that's amazing that I managed to do that. And I feel like this game, and we've talked about this before, is that you're as a developer, your skills with the game are above what your audience probably will have. I feel like a lot of the missions, especially that have timing, are too tight for the audience. I mean, in particular for us, two old guys, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that it's really that if they just loosened those things up, in most cases, like 10%. Like I failed a mission this evening just before I was coming up to record that I was 2 or 3 meters from the target and failed it. I was like, oh, I was just that close. And now I have to go do it again. And you get that close and you're just like, oh, man.
Yeah. It's demoralizing. Yeah. And it's, and those, we've talked about wall missions before, but those are moments that are not wall missions in the linear sense, but those are moments that people will put the game down, right? Because they just get frustrated.
Yeah.
And I think as you were talking, it helped me distill down an example of what I'm talking about even better. Like, to be honest, like I think my takeaway with this is with a sandbox game like this, which they've probably figured out by now, but I can't say because I haven't played the modern ones. But with a sandbox open world game like this, where it is about player agency and just player ownership over what they want to do and how they want to do it, timers just are counterintuitive to that.
Yeah.
So it's like make the missions around what you should embrace with the way that the world and the systems work really well. And timers don't really do that per se. And lean into that sort of chaos and tomfoolery of it and build the missions around that versus arbitrary aspects of timers. And that one simple thing probably could have helped a lot, and I hopefully they've learned that in the future games. Because it's just not necessary, I don't think, because the player's going to want to fool around. They want to do things because the world is so amazing.
Yeah, I while you were talking, I was searching Red Dead Redemption 2 timed missions, and it seems like they've gotten away from missions with literal timers on them to like missions that are only available for short windows of time.
Interesting. So once you're on them, you're good.
You're fine, but if you don't do them, if you don't start them in time, they're gone. You can't.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a softer version, but I still don't think that feels appropriate because there's so much chaos that can happen to you along the way.
Yeah. Their games are chaos engines. I mean, you've talked about that. Yeah. I mean, and the latest one in particular, it's, I accidentally bumped this guy with my horse. Now his whole clan is hunting me, or whatever, it just becomes this very, like, the punishment for I'm not good with the controls is very high in a lot of these games. And that's something I think we've gotten away from in games. And in many cases, I think that there are certainly games where that's still a big thing. Obviously, fighting games just generally are like precision game type. And then, of course, the Souls games, which we've talked about, or something like Ninja Gaiden.
But I think those are good examples. I feel like in the Souls case, they know what they are and what they're trying to do, and things kind of marry well with all of that together, versus
I think they give you information there too as well. I mean, they have everything is there if you pay attention to know what's going on, right? I mean, it's I mean, I think that you're very right that this game is not sort of finding its lanes and staying in them, to pick more car analogies, and to do what they want to do. But I think they probably in some cases get better at that. I don't remember this being a huge deal in like Red Dead Redemption, which is probably the most recent Rockstar game I've played. Yeah, in the first one, not the new one.
Let me ask you this one note I wrote down that I'm fearful of with our playthrough of this, that I'd love to hear maybe people write in on if you don't have a perspective on this. But because of the nature of the podcast and the way that we're playing, I fear that, because I'm doing no side stuff, you know what I mean? I'm not just spending a couple hours just kind of like cruising around, seeing what happens, doing side stuff, getting in a taxi or whatever. And we actually got one of our letters last time or the time before, right? He was mentioning that this is a game he comes back to do just that.
Yeah.
And, and we've had good criticism on sort of, this is more on the tonal sort of moral side of it, that we don't get it. But then also I kind of worry that we might not be getting it on that side too, of just being that cruising around kind of game that you kind of feel, it feels like what all the success that GTA 5 online has had, where it's like there isn't, missions aren't really the point. It's really about just kind of like going and doing these side things. Do you play that way at all, or are you also just doing missions, or what have you?
I've always, at least with the GTA games, I've always been very mission focused. With the original Red Dead Redemption, I was much more, I'm going to do all the stuff you can do in this game. And so that's a game that I don't know, whatever the platinum trophy equivalent is on the Xbox. I did that, right? I got all of them. I forget what that's called in the Xbox ecosystem, but
I think it's 1,000 points. Right?
Yeah, I got 1,000 gamer score or whatever in that game. And, but that stuff is more obvious and directed, I felt like, in that game. Here, I mean, it is kind of like, oh, what if I steal? I mean, I guess what you need to do, and what I think certain player types enjoy, is like pushing the boundaries of these sorts of games and saying, well, what if I do this thing that's nobody's telling me to do? And what if I do this thing? And what if I steal a police car, or I steal a fire engine, or I steal a taxi cab? I mean, taxi cab is probably the one that it's going to happen to, and it's going to give you a clue that there's other stuff you can do. Hop in a taxi cab and it'll tell you, press R3, for me anyway, press R3 to start the taxi missions, which is basically drive around and basically do crazy taxi, more or less.
Yeah.
Pick up people. I actually tried to do that once when I was being chased by the police, just to see what would happen. I didn't have time to ever slow down and pick anybody up, so I ended up ending the taxi stuff.
Well, there was even that one SUV that I found by the wharf. Remember I told you that I got into it by chance and it started a drive through these rings mission.
Right.
Like just a driving challenge, and it was literally like going over the hills and like on the beach, and under the bridge and stuff. And I didn't finish it because I crashed, but it was just a random thing I just found.
Yeah. I feel like that is a thing that love them or hate them, that achievements and trophies do well is to point you. If you're not the sort of person who's going to naturally poke at those borders, that's a thing that those systems can do really well, is say, oh, hey, here's this other stuff you haven't thought to try. We'll hide all the sort of story ones or whatever, but we're going to tell you about all this off the beaten path stuff that you can do in our game. That's not collectibles, not, whatever. It's literally like, oh, have you found this thing that you can do? I bet you didn't know our game did this. And I think that that's actually been a nice way to add life to games. And one of the things I've always appreciated achievements or trophies for is just I didn't think to do that.
Checklist.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. I love that checklist. And, but yeah, no, I don't play these games that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was suspecting. And I wonder if that literal thing is one of the joys for people of these games, that they just kind of like going and doing all that stuff too, which, there's definitely certain games, the Arkham games, Witcher 3 talked about before, those are games like that I literally do everything on. So
yeah,
I have my version of that, and I appreciate that. So I think I just wanted to mention that because I think that's probably the case for these games for some people too. And yeah.
Do you want to briefly talk about the cars? Because
that was another point. Yeah.
Once you get to that second island, man, everybody over there has a better car.
Yeah, and you can totally see the design reasons for that from a progression and escalation standpoint. Where you want to feel like you're getting cooler stuff. The farther you go in, the disadvantage of that is the early cars are so bad that it kind of, for me at least, it put me off of driving altogether. Even though that's sort of the core of the game and clearly can be fun. But you don't realize it until it's far too late, in my opinion. You're like, oh man, if I had this car the whole time, I'd be having a much better time. And so I get it. You don't want to give them the best stuff up front, but it's a really tricky balance because it just felt so bad for so long. And that Yakuza Viper, that's right by Asuka's house, that I get basically every time I get a mission, I just get a new one.
Yeah.
Just so much more fun.
Yeah, those are excellent cars to drive. I mean, there's a number of good cars like that on that island or in that sort of half of the game. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's not enough of those cars just driving around. Like the Diablo car, whatever those are called, are okay, I guess, in the original sort of island. But I'm also put off by the driving model. And a lot of it is because the first half of this game, the driving is just terrible. It's just not good. Yeah. And I think that also prevents you being interested in doing these kind of off the beaten path things as well, because if you don't jibe with that model, with that driving model, you're just not going to have fun doing side missions in it. You just can't even imagine, like, I'm just going to pick up this other terrible car to do weird thing with. It just fights you. It fights you at every, like the driving models fight you early in the game, the first half of the game or whatever. And then the other thing that fights you that I think I mentioned maybe the first or second episode is the world systems fight you too. I mean, they are intentionally having people change lanes all the time, and there's jaywalkers all over the place. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what? It's kind of like you feel like they're just turning the screws on you if you want to actually not, or they're just telling you you're gonna have stars all the time. Like, this is a game where you're gonna be, in hot pursuit a lot. Yeah. So it's like, but what if you don't want to do that? So anyway, maybe I'm just playing wrong. No, I mean, I don't think the whole point is that there is no wrong way, right? There's no wrong way. Yeah. But I just don't feel like that's the case. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. That should be the point, but I don't think that's what they actually did. Yeah. I think stealthily the developers are trying to turn you into psychopaths. Yeah. No. You heard it here first. Yeah. Or last. Not here first, for sure. Been said. Yeah, it's probably been said before. All right. Do you want to take a quick break and we'll come back and a little feedback? Yeah. Sounds good. Welcome back from the break. This is the part of the podcast where we like to go over your feedback, talk about any questions you might have, whether having to do with the game we're playing or anything about game development in general. We'll have some longer ones this time, so we'll see how far we go. We just have a couple of emails, but they're quite long. First, though, I want to read a review from Mazurian the Mag, if that is your real name. I know the Mag is a very common kind of Hungarian surname.
The Mag.
The Mag. I don't know. Anyway, the title is Great Retro Gaming Podcast. Simply says, very relaxing to listen to and knowledgeable veteran game developers play and talk about games. And yes, that's what we try to do here. But we do like to read those reviews here on the cast.
We like to soothe people to sleep, as been.
That's right, the ASMR cast. Follow the sultry sound of my voice. It's sort of like driving around in the cars in GTA 3 and hearing all the weird voices that are on there. Like if you listen to Chatterbox a lot. Anyway, that was sent to us through the podcast app or iTunes or what have you, the Apple infrastructure or ecosystem for podcasts, and we appreciate having those. It helps us reach the new listeners. Most podcast listening, I guess, is still done that way. Anyway, we also take emails at devgameclub@gmail.com, where Tim has this one from Mikkel. Go ahead, sir.
Subject is GTA Memories and Musings from Mikkel Lodal. I think he's written before.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, he has.
Okay, I'm not the memory person on this podcast either, so I apologize, Mikkel. Dear Tim Duville and Brett Longo Jr. Wait, those aren't your real names, in parentheses. So clever. You almost got me there. It's been a while since I've written you, but your episodes on GTA 3 made me want to tell you the story of how I realized there was going to be a lot to think about with them around video games.
With them, their video games.
Yeah. I was playing GTA San Andreas, and in that game, you have a mechanic where your character CJ would get fat when you ate fast food. You would have to eat the fast food, though, because it was one of the easiest ways to quickly heal up again after missions and fights. So to counteract the finger-licking good diet of Clucking Bell, I assume that's the restaurant,
yep.
I had to take CJ to the gym to keep him fit enough to, steal cars and whatnot. During one of these virtual workout sessions, I realized that I was using one hand on the controller to get my avatar in better shape, while my other hand was buried in a bag of local Danish variant of Cheetos. The extreme dissonance of carrying enough about my virtual body to inanely press a button again and again in a boring mini game, while at the very same time being careless enough with my actual body to eat something that proudly advertises itself as tasting like cheese. Made me see that the situation of playing video games was a bit more complicated than I had thought. I've been thinking about it ever since. Can either of you remember a similar moment where the weird nature of this medium we love so much suddenly was put into sharp focus for you, and or a moment like that which has stayed with you through the years? He goes on. So hold that thought.
I'm going to think about that. Yeah, while you continue.
Yeah. I will probably not be able to think about that and read, but I will try. I also wanted to chime in on the discussion of violence and nihilism in games that you have had in the series. I played and still play my share of violent video games, but I think I've in recent years, in my mid-30s, found it more and more weird. So that so much care is given to making kills look cool in games I otherwise enjoy, like the Assassin's Creed series. It's not that I find it offensive at all. It just doesn't really do anything for me anymore, especially when compared to how much time and care obviously go into it from a developer standpoint. I feel the same about the violence in GTA games. It's just sort of there. I see exactly what you guys mean about the nihilism in the GTA series, although I'd add that the thing that really turns me off a lot of these entries in the series is that no one in the game seems to fight that nihilism. GTA 5 is the only game I have ever traded in because after playing through the story, I just had no interest in going back to the world. There seemed to be nothing worthwhile or valuable in it. The one other thing that I've ever encountered that reminded me of this is the Netflix animated show BoJack Horseman, which has the similar sense of nihilism, but where the characters are constantly fighting against the emptiness of the world and themselves. Something it seems GTA characters are incapable of. Again, GTA does really not offend me or seem distasteful, and I have had a lot of fun in the worlds as well. But they sort of can't hold my interest. No characters in them stand up for anything, and that translates to the games not standing up for anything, and ultimately them not being that interesting beyond what you can wrangle from interacting with the systems, a la my Cheeto moment above. Assuming you agree with my take, do you think your opinion of the games would be different if there was a strong point of view expressed in them of some kind or another? Anyway, I obviously have to include a sentence, especially for Tim. Oh, jeez. The vehicular kleptomania-fueled nihilism of the digital mayhem simulation extravaganza seems poised to undermine any attempt at profound existential, epistemological, ethical, or metaphysical pontification, eroding at titillating interest, cursory or otherwise, from my otherwise adventurous palate for software-based pastimes. Keep up the great work, guys. Then he'll his kind words.
You've broken Tim. It's just he's a puddle in a conference room somewhere in Seattle. Okay, a couple issues there. Epistemological. That's okay because I was a philosophy undergrad, and you said eroding at titillating instead of eroding all titillating interest. Okay. So yeah, but otherwise not bad. You were going along. I was like, man, he's doing really well. And then epistemological happened, and that was just like a big wipeout.
Yeah, I just rolled through. If I had stopped, it would have just not gone well. So
you were just going a complete lockup. Yeah, I mean, so for me, for sure, I think that if there were a strong point of view here, I think I could buy it a lot more.
I think he hit the nail on the head for me. I really think he did a better job that I have been doing it, kind of expressing some of that lack of something or other. Yeah. But go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think that there's so often in sort of this somewhat nihilistic sorts of fiction in different media, there's someone somewhere you can grab a hold of and say, at least, I mean, even just to say the cares of two people don't amount to a hill of beans in this world, right? Even just to be able to say that is a thing. Like, you know what? We can't, the force of history are too much for us. We just have to do the best we can, would be a thing to say, right? That you could grab onto and feel, I mean, maybe not good about, but at least be like, okay, I can roll with that. I get it. We're caught up in something bigger than us or whatever. It's this weird confluence of the sort of nihilism of the world and yet the continued persistence of the player's character, this Claude, both his name and sort of who he is, that is just so off-putting. He's not a guy who's looking to make good. He's just this random thug, I mean, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's like what's at stake, right? I think there's another version of that where, we don't have to get into sort of story structure and Aristotelian structure and all that kind of stuff, but there is something to be said with something to be at stake, conflict, etc., right? And having to Mikhail's point, different perspectives on that conflict, hence protagonist, antagonist, etc. And it's like, if you don't have, and I always talk about it in the yin and yang of things, and I definitely go too far with this just because it's my personality, and I really believe in the sort of that kind of balance. But to his point, there really isn't that balance, and so like the nihilism, I think, would land better if there was an alternate perspective. And I feel like, to his point, like often their stuff seems to, and I can't speak to this intelligently because, like I've already said, I haven't played all their stuff, but my impression from listening to people and talking to people about it and watching people play to some degree is that, it just doesn't land well, right? It's more of just the chaos factory is really what people tend to focus on. And people there are definitely people that like the stories to some degree, but the way they talk about the stories after they've finished the games isn't the same way you talk about other stories,
Yeah.
And there's something, and I don't know if people really realize it at the time, but there's just something different. The one exception to that I will say is I feel like the Red Dead games, and that's why if I were to probably delve into any of their games more deeply, it might be those, because I think there are perspectives, it seems like, in those games that are not, especially in the first one, that are not like the GTA ones, which are so much more nihilistic. I don't know that to be for sure, but it seems like it's maybe
Red Dead has its own problems.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, those problems are a little less obvious. I think playing it around, I mean, I didn't play it super long after it came out, and I think at the time that it came out, there was it was doing things narratively that other games hadn't tried, and so it stuck out and really made an impact as a result, just because they were trying these things. If you then go back and look at the actual message behind some of that stuff, it's pretty gross. I point people at the recent Waypoints episodes. I think there was 2 of them about Red Dead from waypoint.vice.com, Austin Walker, Patrick Klepek, Danielle Riendo. Who else is on that? Rob Zachney and Natalie Watson is the new sort of youngest reporter on that staff. Yeah, I mean, I would recommend listening to those. You'd get kind of like what's in that game from a story perspective. Rob Zachney in particular is really like, oh, let's talk about the politics of this game. And you go, oh yeah, look at that. Those are pretty gross. I mean, and it was a different era even 10 years ago. It feels like the world moves along a lot faster. And as I've gotten older, I've paid more attention to a lot of those sorts of concerns as well. So anyway.
Maybe there's not progress there, but I think he's to me, I think his it's just so funny that BoJack Horseman is his counterpoint, which I think I love. But I think, to be honest, the sentence that stood out to me the most was just his point about bringing the game back. There was just sort of like this apathy that he seems to have of like, I just didn't really care anymore.
Yeah.
And it's the funny thing about that is it's almost having, for him at least, it had an opposite effect that I think they wanted. Because it feels like, I think the thing that bugs me about it is it feels like they're trying so hard to do this. Right? They're those guys, right? They're like, we're anyway. I don't want to go to the place I was going to go, but you know what I mean. Like they're trying to elicit this sort of reaction from people, but then if you don't, to his point, if you don't have that counterpoint, they actually kind of won't achieve it for a lot of people.
Yeah,
it's like it's not as punk rock as they want it to be.
Yeah.
Because punk rock has to have authority to fight against or something. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think the further you go in sort of the Rockstar Games story, I mean, to more modern day, the less they're even trying to punch up, and they're only punching down. And I think that there's something about their success in that as well, that they get to a point of privilege where they don't have to be concerned about the things that concern some of the people they punch at, right? And so it seems silly to them to why would you even care about, whatever, the pronouns you use or something like that, right? Well, of course you don't have to care about it if you're the dominant, whatever. So anyway, I mean, I think there's a lot of that in it as well.
It's a very interesting landscape. I was thinking about that recently about, cause there's some of the, and again, I don't want to make this about games we're not playing, but some of the sort of commentary on the way that, the care and love that Red Dead 2 is that that they put into it, and just, the fidelity animations and kind of the methodical nature of it, which kind of sounds interesting to me, to be honest, and not typical, but just doing it for the love of the craft and the auteur nature of what it sounds like the game is. But they've gotten to this point where they can do that. They can do whatever they really want to. And, people won't play it if it's not good. So it must be good to some degree. But and then a counterexample that I was thinking about the other day when I heard people talk about Red Dead 2 is Blizzard. They also kind of can do whatever they want, but they choose to take it in different directions, right? They spend more time than is possible for most people on a game, and make it really good. And they've chosen to use that privilege that they have earned themselves over the years to do different things with it. So it's just interesting to see these two behemoths in the industry and what they've done with the station that they've put themselves in by making good games, and it's very fascinating to me.
And that's why I'm looking so forward to Diablo Immortal.
Oh boy.
Can open, worms everywhere. I'm not even really introducing that as a topic. I was just being a snide.
I'm not as down on that as
no, I realize. I saw that Activision shares took a tumble on that. I'm like, oh my god, that's going to make so much money. Now's the time to buy Activision stock. Anyway, the other part of Mikkel's email was like, did you ever have a moment where you sort of were taken out of of playing the game and evaluating, what was underneath the hood? I finally thought of one for me, which was, I think it was Baldur's Gate. Pretty sure it was Baldur's Gate. There was a quest where some woman hadn't seen her child in some period of time, and you had to basically go try to find out what happened to them. They were dead. And when you came back, you could either, to resolve the quest, you could either tell the truth, your child died in this horrible way, or you could lie. Your child escaped to, I don't know, whatever, the Elven lands. Who knows? I don't remember the particulars. What I remember is saving before I turned it in, turning it in one way, reloading, and turning in the other. And having it result in the same XP. And just at that point going, so that didn't matter. And I mean, in a sense it does matter, right? Because we feel a certain way, and
intrinsically, but extrinsically it didn't matter.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is sort of there are those sorts of distinctions, but that was a time where I was like, oh, I'm seeing beneath this thing. It's very similar in BioShock, where it doesn't matter if you harvest the little sisters or not, really. I mean, you get a different ending, but mechanically through most of the game, you get the same amount of Adam and etc. And you see that stuff, you're like, oh, I wish it were harder for me to be the good guy.
Yeah.
I wish that was a definite challenge, because the payoff to me would be so much more to feel like, I'm making sacrifices I'm making this much harder on myself to not cross this line. So that might actually be another one of just sort of like, oh, if I, if that choice mattered more than it did, I might come away from that. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to love that game. But that I don't think is one of them. So anyway, all right. Yeah. Did you have one? I didn't know if you thought of one. I'm sorry.
I don't, not as sort of a, as not as a deep one, as deep as the one that you shared. I wish I could, there's probably countless, like you said, RPG centric ones that were sort of choice based like that. The interesting, I don't know, the only two came to mind. Both of them are kind of dumb, but the first pretty obvious one of sort of blurring of the lines and kind of reassessing life and kind of what does this all mean has happened to me multiple times in WoW. And what I mean by that is, in a kind of a meta sense, is, there is truth to be told when people joke around about how that is a second job. And there's been multiple times when we're raiding, or especially back in vanilla, which spoiler, maybe we try to play in the podcast someday because of the classic stuff, but where you're organizing 40 people, and you're all in one place at one time, and you are all going to do this completely difficult thing together, coordinating it, people you don't know, you've never met in real life, and you spend no joke, like over 6 months, of time perfecting this scenario essentially in gameplay. And then you start thinking, you just start thinking to yourself about the rest of your life, and and why am I doing this, and what am I getting from it, and so it's not exactly the same thing that he was saying, or what you're saying, but there's sort of like, where do the divisions lie, and how am I getting meaning and purpose out of this, and why am I putting myself through this, and I guess there's the reward of it, right? And there's the achievement of it that ultimately is there if you get it. But there were times when we didn't as a guild, so it's like, yeah, just a lot of soul searching in that. And then kind of another weird counterexample that no one will see coming. Brett may remember a little bit of Reed and my obsession of this game, but I had some interesting moments with Trespasser, which is an old janky ass game. It was a Jurassic Park franchise game called Trespasser. Probably nobody has played it or heard of it. But it actually was a pretty influential game for some people that we might talk about someday, that is really interesting to me, because it was basically like one of the early full simulation first-person games where they were doing things way ahead of their time that they shouldn't have been trying to do. But there was definitely this sense of simulation in that game where it made me really kind of rethink what games should be attempting to do, because at that point, a lot of the games we've played in that same era on the podcast were about power fantasy and about like sort of like the very gamey, and kind of knowing that they're a video game and stuff. And this game was just a weird beast where it was trying to do something else, and it just kind of made me rethink some things, where I had these assumptions about, well, yeah, all video games had to be like this. And then this one comes out, which definitely not a good game in its heart, like not in its heart, but in the sort of technicality of it. But it had something going on that was some underpinnings of things, and it was challenging sort of the norms. And I don't think they knew what they were doing. They just wanted to make this fully sim game where your health is literally, you have to look at your body, and there's all sorts of other weird things there. And you had to hold your gun in a completely physics-based way, like up. It's even hard to explain. Somebody, you should, hopefully there's videos out there. And even the dinosaurs moved with the physics-based system in IK and stuff. And so they would even trip and fall and stumble because the sim was kind of, forcing them to do that because of the slope of the hill. It was just this weird first kind of deep simulation in a first person way, not like a flight sim way, that kind of dawned on me what we're getting ourselves into. So that was my other long-winded dumb example.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to put in the show notes this actually just came up recently, an interview with Seamus Blackley, who was the project lead or whatever on that project, Trespasser. He had actually been at Looking Glass, though not on any of the games we've talked about. So he did System Shock, Terra Nova, Flight Unlimited, and I think there was another one. Maybe it was just those at Looking Glass. So he was kind of, hot stuff as far as programmers went at the time. And they he was 25 and they gave him a whole project to do on his own, and he was not ready for it. And a lot of things got in the way, including, by his own confession, his ego. So I'll put that in the show notes, because it's interesting to read about how this game could have been more than it was, and maybe was impacted just by,
So he wasn't he also on the Xbox team?
He was. Oh yeah, absolutely. He's in fact, I think he ended the interview, and I have it up, but it's kind of whatever. But to some degree, because of this failure of Trespasser, he jumped ship from whatever company that was and went to Microsoft, because he had met Bill Gates once before, and Bill had said, you should come work for me. And so he took him up on it after he had this amazing failure on this video game. And so he had a lot to do with the original Xbox team. So it's certainly interesting game history and all of that. That's a game that has its own thing. Yeah,
well, DreamWorks Interactive, I think.
That's right. Yeah, it's DreamWorks. Yeah.
And I don't think they did much after this, but I think it was kind of an infamous project. But what I was alluding to with this game that we might get to someday, which I guess we could put in the show notes now, but if we ever do play Far Cry 2, Clint Hawking, in one of his talks at GDC about Far Cry 2, he references Trespasser quite a bit, and he and I have talked a little bit about it over the years. And Trespasser had inspiration for Far Cry 2, specifically, is my recollection. I could have some of that, some of the details wrong, but so his talk may be up. I don't know if it's accessible to the public. It's pretty old by this point, but if we ever get to that game, Brett and I have talked about it at some point. It's a little bit fresher than games we've played, but maybe not by much. Trespasser is, again, that's what I was alluding to with its influence. Trespasser, I don't think it's a game we would play on the podcast per se, but its influence is, even though it was technically a failure and it's technically kind of a bad game, it is a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Clearly impacted people like Clint, who, is one of the best designers in the business. So, anyway.
Yeah, I think that was Dynamics, the state of the art, and it was in GDC 2011. So I don't know if that's available to view, but I think we were at that talk together. So
we might have been.
Yeah. I was still going to the talks back then. Okay. Well, I was gonna go to another email, but I know you've got a ferry and things to catch. So there's only one thing left to do, and that's to thank our super fan.
Yeah.
And that's Aaron Evers, friend of the cast. He's written a number of times. Aaron actually sent us last year a box of goodies that were sort of Christmas inflected. This year he sent us a box of goodies that were Texas inflected. And I've already been sampling some of it, and it is delicious. And I will say that Yellowbird sauce, man, that will burn your tongue. I put some on an omelet yesterday, and it was like, whoa, that's hotter than I thought. But I made it through. It's delicious. It just is. That's a spicy omelet. And he packed in with there a couple of T-shirts. I don't know what yours were. We were going to reveal that on the show, so I'd like to hear.
Yeah, we don't know what each other's are. We were assuming they're different. So one.
I know one of mine you did not get.
Oh, okay, good. All right. Well, so one of mine, probably because of my Yoda persona, is one I've never seen that is just brilliant. It is an image of Luke on Dagobah, but he is in the he's on the Karate Kid post, like in the Karate Kid crane. And Yoda's on his back. So he's doing the Karate Kid crane, but with Yoda.
That's pretty good.
Yoda on, silhouetted with a sun behind it, and it's really, really funny and awesome. And then the other one says it's got the rebel symbol, and it says Rebel Scum since 1977, and it's kind of like this retro kind of feel treatment of it. So 2 Star Wars-y centric ones for me. What about you?
Very nice. Mine were, I would say, even a little bit more specific to me. I've mentioned on the cast previously that I've been DMing for my son and his friends, and I got awesome T-shirt with this like it's like a whole bunch of D&D monsters, and in the middle of them is a 20-sided die that's been anthropomorphized a little bit, has arms. So you can see it's a D20, has a 20, and then it has like a face and two arms out. And the two hands are like grabbing the eye stalks of a beholder, but there's also like an orc and a goblin and like maybe a direwolf. There's a gelatinous cube and a dragon, and they're all, and there's a lich that I think is a Sirorak, who is the lich in Tomb of Horrors, because he's got the same crown. The detail work is fantastic. So there's that. So the next time I DM, I'm going to have that on, and I'm just going to wear it underneath like something over the top. And then when it starts to get warm, because I've got 5 20-year-olds in my kitchen, I'll pull off the outer layer, and it'll just be there. So there's that. And the one that I was saying, I know you didn't get, is one that has a picture of a bit of a bookshelf. And then the logo all around it is, that's what I do. I read books and I know things.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh my God, that's so you.
Yep, fantastic. Yep, like world's greatest authority here. So
yeah, built for you.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how did he do it?
Perfect.
The internet. Yeah.
Anyway, so Aaron, thank you so much. I'll be sending a thank you note along with a little something for you. Because we appreciate you so much, and it just warms our hearts to get that.
Thank you. And yeah, and I was telling Brett in pre-show, most of the things are definitely good. I will say that little does he know, 4 of the items that he put in there are like 4 of my favorite things, food-wise. Whole pecan pie, which is one of my favorite pies. Turtle chocolates, which I think they're called something else in that one, but
they're Brags. They're called Brags, yeah.
Brags, yeah. So we call them turtles, and so that's one of my favorite chocolates. Peanut butter, which I haven't tried yet, but Brett says amazing.
Oh God, I just want to go bury my face in that jar like right now.
Yeah, and then Star Wars. So that was my 4th.
All right, of course.
Yeah, he nailed it. And I just basically opened that pie up and just started eating. I didn't even cut a piece. I just
like stuck a fork in it.
Jen actually has a picture of me that I might put on Twitter at some point. So
cool. I will look for it.
Yeah.
Tag Dev Game Club, so I see it.
Very well.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Like I said, those were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find the podcast on Twitter at devgameclub. You can find Tim on Twitter at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
I am no longer posting stuff to Twitter, but you can find me at my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Brett Douville, no underscore. I also want to thank an email from Jesse Morgan. I'm going to reply to you just to give you some thoughts. We may read parts of it at least next week on the cast. It's extremely long, so I need to condense it a little bit probably to read on the cast, and Tim's got to go catch that boat. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us, and of course, have fun playing games this week, and good night.
Good night.